The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today, Back to School with Texthelp featuring EquatIO. My name is Caitlin Ross, and I'm a member of the Texthelp marketing team, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We have some amazing presenters lined up and are excited to get started. But a couple of housekeeping items before we dive into the presentation. Today's session is in listen-only mode, but we'd love to hear from you and answer your questions. Throughout the session, feel free to type in the questions/chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll be monitoring throughout the session, and we will have time at the end of the presentation to answer some of your questions. Feel free to test out the chat box now, type a quick hello, or let us know what you're excited to learn about today. I also wanted to let you know that the session today will be recorded. A follow-up email will be sent tomorrow with a link to the recording as well as some additional resources. And if you'd like a copy of today's slides to follow along or to take some notes, I just shared the link to the slides in the GoToWebinar chat box, or you can type the URL displayed on the screen here. And while you're opening the slides, I wanted to remind all of you that we're running a contest today. We're giving away a copy of Casey Bell's new book, Shake Up Learning: Practical Ideas to Move Learning from Static to Dynamic. All you have to do is stay on until the end of the webinar, and we'll pick a lucky winner. So let's get this session started. I'm excited to introduce our speakers for today's presentation. First, we have John McGowan, Product Manager at Texthelp and visionary behind EquatIO. And John will be joined by Craig Scheel, Technology Integration Teacher at Bedford High School in New Hampshire, along with two of his colleagues who teach math at Bedford High, Lauren Hagedorn and Stefan Fritz. Today they'll be sharing the groundbreaking new features we've recently added to EquatIO, along with some first-hand examples and best practices for integrating EquatIO into your lesson plans. Thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to hand things over to John and Craig.
Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate that. And I'm really excited for Craig to join me. I love it. You always get the Shield deal from him. Craig is amazing, so I'm so thankful that he shared some of his time with us. I also did want to say that thank you to all of you as well. As a former teacher, I know that teachers' time is their most valuable commodity, and so I want to make sure that we are valuable for you to be able to share your time with us. So thank you so much. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about EquatIO, and then we're going to toss it to Craig and talk where he's going to talk about his help in integrating it in his school district, and also talk about some math use cases with some of his amazing teachers. So if you haven't seen EquatIO ever, that's awesome. I'm going to go give a brief overview of it and do some demos. And if you have seen EquatIO, here's some of the list of some of our updates that we've done this year. And one of the things that I'm really amazed and in awe of every morning is that EquatIO is barely over a year old. It's not even a year and a half old. And we've come so far. I'm so thankful to have such an amazing development team and to work with awesome people at Texthelp here, where we can integrate EquatIO, working with read and write. So it's just a great piece. So one of the things that we updated in February was in the EquatIO math space, we have an assignment feature and some quick feedback, which is a great point of where we're working on having students get quick feedback so that they care more about the feedback as it comes instantly, and they're going to be more likely to go back and revisit that problem and edit and kind of do what we want them to do to revise. And then in March, we launched EquatIO Mobile, which allows you to bring math from the physical world, whether you write it down on a piece of paper or whether you're using your touch screen on your phones, to bring it into the digital aspect. And so that was a really groundbreaking part for us to be able to take handwritten math that was on a piece of paper and make it editable and accessible. In April, we launched the EquatIO for Canvas LTI. So we're bringing EquatIO into other integrations, other LMSs, we work with Google Classroom, obviously, but EquatIO and Canvas is nice to keep all of the, if you're using Canvas for your LMS, to keep all of your students contained within Canvas for your Canvas support, where you can do quizzes, use SpeakGrader. It's a great way to integrate math and science content if you're using Canvas for your LMS. Then in May, we brought in the screenshot reader. So I'll demo the screenshot reader, but essentially what it does is anywhere on the web, if you're in Google Chrome, we can pop out the EquatIO screenshot reader and we can read the math that you find. Really excited by that to kind of make other websites accessible and reusable as well. And then in July, finally, we got multiple line equation support. That was a lot of work on our end to be able to do that. I'm really excited to be able to showcase that. And then also we work in the Texthelp PDF reader. And so that was another thing where if you have PDFs, I know all of us have previous resources. We don't always want to reinvent the wheel, and we don't always want to create content. I want you to be able to use your existing awesome resources that work well. So PDFs are one of those necessary evils that we have there to be able to work with. So I'm excited to do that and showcase that where we can directly integrate EquatIO into a PDF and to add in a bunch more prediction items. So a little bit about EquatIO. What is EquatIO? I just think about it as it's supposed to be easy, intuitive, delightful, and fun to create STEM content online. So when I usually say those words, people usually laugh at me because it's never fun or never intuitive to do that with the previous palette-based editors. And so we're trying to make it so students, my goal is so that a student can easily communicate their thought process online. And so we do that by using a variety of UDL principles. So the Universal Design for Learning is a framework that, the way that I think about it is it gives student choice. They should get to have the power to choose how they want to respond and choose their favorite method and medium to do that. So that's going to be the best way to get student engagement, which I think is the heart of everything we want to do. If I can get a student engaged, then I can use my teacher magic with questioning skills and all those other tools in my tool belt to get them to that math content. And so by empowering them to respond in the way that they choose, that's further down the line into that engagement piece to help get them working into a piece where they can tell me what they think. Because honestly, as a teacher, that's what I want to know. Tell me what you know and how you're thinking about it. And then finally, we integrate directly with Read and Write, Texthelp's flagship literacy product, which does a really great job of reading it aloud, which I think from a pedagogy standpoint is really great to make it easy for those that require that accessibility, but also for all, it's just awesome for everybody. And this slide kind of encapsulates my entire teaching philosophy with a few quick quick hitting points. I think every teacher would say that we always want to know, tell me about the underlying math concept. If you're a science teacher, it's the same, you have the same pain point. So I say math, you could say science or STEM content in there, because it's, you want to know what are they thinking about. So when I would tell a student to solve or simplify the square root of 4, really I want them to tell me how they think about two numbers that multiply together to give me 4. Now, a lot of times, like, that notation component gets in the way of that. And then the terminology might get in the way. They might know how to draw, but they might not know how to speak it. So those two concepts, the notation and the terminology, before EquatIO were really prerequisites to representing student thought online or creating digital math. You had to know what the notation looked like. Otherwise, you weren't going to find that little button to click. And so that was an impediment to communicating online. And also the terminology piece, to be able to piece those together. So we want to bring those barriers down, allow a student to know maybe one of them or learn as they're going. And that is where those UDL inputs come in together to help from a pedagogical stance to cement notation with terminology. So they could know one and learn the other as they're going. They don't have to have everything pre-planned out. It's a lot of extra cognitive load that me as a teacher and a math aficionado and who loves technology, I can navigate a palette-based editor to help see which are the methods that I want to use and how to plan out how I'm going to make that complicated math structure with cumbersome notational components without having keyboard keys on my computer that represent those ideas. And most of the palettes also have like an X in there. So I've had many students who say, well, I want the square root of 4 button, not the square root of X button. So that's a transferable knowledge that they have to add, which is like extra cognitive load. So what is EquatIO? We have, in top of the Google Chrome extension that we have, we also have an installable app for Windows and Mac. I'm on my Mac on this, so I'll show you how it'll insert into Microsoft Word. And if you just saw my tweet right before, I want to kind of show something that nobody in the world has ever seen outside of our company, just a demo of what's coming out for our EquatIO for Desktop update that will come out probably this week. And so it's a really great integration into Microsoft Word. And so the UDL methods that we have for input, we have LaTeX, which I hope nobody ever has to learn. If you know LaTeX, awesome. UDL says you can choose that, but I don't want that to be a prerequisite, which is LaTeX is a typesetting language that really the only person that needs to know that is a university or college professor that's trying to publish a peer-reviewed journal. And even then, we could probably find some other ways to do that. Prediction, I think, is a really awesome way to communicate thought, because if you know the phrase, you can use the prediction to input cumbersome notational components, which is great for chemical notation, math formula, or just some difficult to type math structures. The speech input's really great for speed, for workflow, but also for those students that need to use speech input. It's a really great way to do that. We also have handwriting recognition, math writing shortcuts. So those math writing shortcuts that you've already used previously, whether you're talking about calculator type speak or using in Microsoft's equation editor or math type or Google's, any of those, like if you use the slash key that can make a fraction, the caret key goes up to the superscript, the underline button goes down to the subscript, those work as well. So if you've invested time to learn those, I don't want you to waste your time. I want you to be able to use it more efficiently. And so those really work well. And then we have a graphing through Desmos. Desmos, I think, is the cream of the crop in terms of graphing. It shifted and changed the way that I taught units by animating through visualizations, and they're just super awesome people. So you can take any Desmos graph you have and share it and then import it directly into EquatIO and then put it anywhere that EquatIO goes. So you can make a form question, form response, put it in a slide, put it in Google Doc, let the students animate through it. So all those are really great. I've already referenced the G Suite here, and so we work in the entire G Suite. That's why we do a Chrome extension. As Katie so, I don't know, elegantly put it, or just embarrassingly said that about me as the visionary behind EquatIO. Really, I was a teacher who wanted my students to use math. And so I made a Google add-on called GMath that was working in Google Docs, Sheets, and Forms, which is all the places add-ons work. Now there's add-ons and slides, but there's still not add-ons for drawings, and there's not add-ons for form responses. So that's where the extension, the Chrome extension gains that power, because we can work outside of the existing add-on ecosystem. And then the final platform that we have is the EquatIO Math Space, which essentially is it's a web app, gives you a large workspace. We have some that sharing functionality with assignments and quick sharing. I think about it a way to create items that are editable and really easy to make. And we have some geometric shapes, virtual manipulatives that are really great for elementary students, counting discs, a variety of shapes. So we'll see some of those from some of our awesome teachers later on, an example that they've used. And then it has a freehand drawing, like an inking part that you can do on there, and the text component that works with our equation editor. So now we just get to jump into the demo time. And so in the demo, essentially how it works is EquatIO is a Chrome extension that works. There's EquatIO. It works really well. You just click it and it pops up my toolbar on the bottom. And so you can see here we have our input methods. And so the input methods that we have are the equation editor, the LaTeX editor, the Desmos graphing editor, a handwriting recognition, speech input, EquatIO mobile, and the screenshot reader. And so one of the things that we have that's new, if you haven't seen EquatIO, is the multiple lines environment. So I'm just going to show the speech input first. So here with the speech input, I can just click on the speech button. I can just start talking, and EquatIO recognizes math words and renders it into math. So I could say 3x squared minus 14x equals 10. And it tries to put it in there. Now, sometimes it changes those x's to the time sign, which is, I feel like that's still okay. I don't like it, but it's okay because the time sign is really difficult to make for students. So if you're going to default to 1, I'm okay with that. So once I click on insert, it just drops that directly into my Google Doc or wherever my environment is. So I will say as well, like we dropped that in there at quite a big size. You can change those in our options menu. You can just click on your options, your math options, and you can change your font size. My daily driving size is extra large because I'm getting old and I like to see it bigger in the font size in my toolbar, but it also inserts at a crisper rendering, so I can make it that image bigger without it getting pixelated or blurry. So that's really great. If I'm in Google Slides, I would probably actually drop it to double extra large, because I can always make a really big image and shrink it down. It'll still be nice and crisp. But if I use a smaller font size and try to make it bigger, it gets blurry. A couple of new things in here are this tips in the equation editor. You'll see we have the little text helper down there that gives me some tips on how I can do some different things. And I'm really excited about the language. So just last week, we put the language localization of French in there. So if you can toggle through those, you can have some maths in there for the UK and Australian population. The Spanish localizes everything to Spanish. You get Spanish prediction, Spanish speech input, and Spanish read aloud. And when you drop it into French, the same thing. It goes to the French localization. You could do French prediction and French speech input. And I was actually really impressed because I'd use Google Translate to figure out how to do some math in French, and even EquatIO picked up my horrible French accent and rendered some math. So I figured if it could do my really horrible French, it could do a fluent French speaker pretty well. You can also toggle on your prediction items. I would suggest if you're a younger student, then you would toggle off your chemistry because we have over 1,200 chemical compounds and formula in there, so that just adds a lot to the prediction menu if you're not intending to utilize them. And so you can just change those options on there. One of the other great parts about EquatIO is everything that we insert will get directly read aloud in there, so it'll read that aloud. So I think that's a really powerful component to help cement what that notational component is. So going back to that, once any teacher can put some information in there, so here's a little text helper helping me to do some of my different things. If I type in SQU, then I'll see that I have that prediction part. So I type in SQU, and it'll say, oh, did you mean squared or square root or square meter, or square kilometer? So it gets all those information. But once I've shared this document, so I can put my math in this document, I can share it out to Google Classroom or whoever I want to disseminate it, and then when my students open it up, they can actually edit that. So they can just click on the math that was created with EquatIO and click on edit, and it brings it in there for them to be able to start with that math. Because so many times I find that my students make just transcription errors. They're copied the problem down wrong from the textbook or from the worksheet that I gave them or from the board. And so they went through and solved the steps correctly. They just didn't solve the problem that I asked them to do because they wrote a different one. So one of the things that I'm super excited by now is once we have this one line of work, all I have to do is if I just hit Shift Enter, it drops down and gives me a whole new line. And so I can just say, oh, great. So I have 3x squared equals 24. So I can just continue working with one line to the next, and it'll insert that, it'll read it aloud. It's awesome. But there's even more. So like besides just hitting Shift Enter, if I hit Shift Control Enter, what it'll do is it'll do a new line and also copy down the work that I already had. So I can just continue working from where I have. So that's a great way for me to just intuitively start and have that workflow that I want to work with to continue my thought process from one step to the next. I've also found that by utilizing the powers of copy and paste and those types of things, then students do two things. One, they show me more steps because it's easier to do that. They don't skip as many steps. And then two, they really get to reinforce what it means for some of these underlying mathematical properties. For instance, one of my biggest things, I always had a big poster in my classrooms that says equality is interchangeability. So if two things are equal, you can interchange them freely. And here with this, when they get to work with EquatIO, they have to physically replace it. So they're not transcribing to the line below and replacing, which is kind of like a two-step process from a cognitive level. It's just a physical one-to-one interchangeability. So that helps reinforce what that equality looks like. So some other things. So if I have something highlighted and I hit the shift key, the slash key, then it puts that highlighted term in the numerator of the fraction. So I can put that 3 in there, and I can come over here and do the same thing, hit the slash key, puts the 3 in there, and I can just continue to work. So I can just drop down, hit that shift control enter and give me that new line. So I can literally just keep showing that work on there. So then here I can say, well, that I can replace that 24 over 3. I can drop that down to be the 8. And then I'll show you a little bit of, I said on my tweet to try to get people to come, I could say that there's going to be an Easter egg in here. So if I highlight something and I hit the slash key, that goes into my control. And if I type the word cancel in there and hit enter, it'll actually stroke through and do that cancel part. So that's not a really very publicized thing because I don't want to type cancel. I want to type reduce. I don't like the word cancel, but that's a LaTeX thing that we need to change. So that's why it's not fully publicized. But I like that because it actually physically shows what they would be doing on that piece of paper. So I like that part. And so it just is a really great way for them to represent their thoughts. So I'm not going to continue to solve. I guess I could solve this one. I'll go, it's only one more step. So I drop that down and I'd say, well, that X. And one of my favorite things I like is if I want to do plus or minus, I can just start typing PL and say, oh, I want plus or minus. And then I can easily highlight that. The same thing if I put that slash and do SQRT, whatever is highlighted, we'll put in that square root. So I know that if I gave this student work, I would say you should have simplified a little further for that square root of 8 into like the perfect square notation. But I think that's okay that I can showcase all of that work really easily to just continue from one step to the next. And I can click on that, I can edit it, I can bring it up if I want, and I can even do the same thing. Like if I want to go here and I can hop over to my speech input and I can say that 8. So I can use a speech part to edit if I want, or I can continue to do this multiple modes representation. So I'm really excited by that multiple lines component. So I can hit Shift Enter to get a new line, Shift Control Enter to copy down to that new line. So that's a really great way to do that. If you've used EquatIO before, you might notice that we have this little green emoji thingy. And it is like, keep going. If it's green, it means you can continue to use our prediction. If it's not green, if it's yellow, it'll say like you can only edit with LaTeX. And that used to come up quite frequently with some different math structures. But with our multiple line thing, now we have more things that we can do with prediction. So like, for instance, one of them is if I want to do a matrix, I can just pick from these matrices in prediction, and now I can continue to do that. So I can just put in whatever matrix I want, and I can continue to do that. So I can even do like A sub 4, and I can just continue to put in whatever I want in there in using my prediction part. I can even do speech as well if I want to continue that. So I could say 6, and it will just continue to pop in there, and I can insert that. And if I wanted to do like a 3x4, all I have to do is I'm in this line down here, and I can just hit Shift Enter, and it drops in a new line. And then a fun thing is if I want another column, just Shift Space, and it gives me another column. And so it just will continue to do that and allows me to have these more flexible math structures that are really helpful. So I'm excited by the ability to be able to do that and to be able to edit with prediction for a lot of those. And then finally, one other thing that I'm really excited about with our new prediction is I can do some elementary vertical operations. So I can just say if I want to do 3-digit addition, I can easily put that in. I can even just do a new line up here. And then if I want to label the place values, we have a prediction for text. So I just start typing text and enter, and it creates a text box. So I can put like my ones unit, and then I can put the same thing like the text for the tens. And so now that brings in for my students, and it already has that ability for them to line those up and be able to work with what does that look like. So so I can insert those problems in very easily and allow them to work using the space of how they want to put them in. So it makes those structures make it easier for them to represent their thought process. I have other things like long division, and even if I go to like partial products, so I have like 3-digit partial products, so I can even go through that from an elementary standpoint and do kind of like a pseudo area model and work on those. So you'll see these continue to be developed over the course of the year. We're going to put some different lines in there as well to make it more, in my mind, a prettier structure. So that's really great. But I did also want to highlight to that text area. So if I do text, I can put something in there. So I could say like solve the following. And so that's all in text. And then now I can go ahead and put my math in there. So like one of the things, this is not a really good problem, but I wanted to show that if it has that vertical spacing. One of the previous things about EquatIO is the text from Google Docs and the inserted equations are not in line. And so if you put the text within there, you can see that it does plop it down very nicely in line. And so it's all on that same baseline. So utilizing the text within the editor, and I can hit Shift Enter if I want and just continue working on there. And so that's great. Another thing is if once I hit Shift Enter, I can hit Shift Space and just say like I can use some text out here to say like, oh, I use the quadratic formula. So I can describe what my steps are doing at each step if I want. And so that's another way that I can continue to add to that thought process to make it more intuitive to explain what I want to do in that digital method. So really excited to be able to showcase the multiple lines that we have within our integration that we have. So that is super, super fun. That's been literally probably every 4th feedback item I've gotten is people wanted to be able to put more than one line at the same time. So I'm happy to be able to do that part. So that's a great component. So I did want to go ahead and show a few different things as well. So if I jumped into the screenshot reader that we have, so here, sorry, I'll let that go in there. That video should have been loaded up. And there we go. So here I can pause a Khan Academy video or any video, and outside of the G Suite, I can pop open EquatIO. And what it's going to do is it's going to give us this screenshot reader. And so that screenshot reader will allow me to, anywhere on the web, I can get handwritten math or text written math, and that'll allow me to be able to render what that math is. it'll read aloud, and then I can actually, if I'm doing a flipped classroom, I can just copy that and go ahead and drop it into EquatIO, and it'll render that as well. So it's a great way to take content outside of the G Suite and then go ahead and then bring it into the G Suite. So I'm really excited by that part, to be able to do that. And then finally, what we were talking about is the PDF reader. And so here, if we use Texthelp's PDF reader, you can see that if I pull up a PDF, I can actually easily use EquatIO to pop down and bring these things directly into the content. So if I have EquatIO open, I can utilize the screenshot reader here, and I can start with those problems and make it so that I can have that make the PDF, which is just previously inaccessible, it's now accessible. I can use a screenshot reader to read it out. And then from there, so that's great for students. I can disseminate this I can share it through Google Classroom, have a PDF that I have. I can even upload PDFs. And then I can use my options to just edit with EquatIO, so it just brings it down there, and then I can solve. So one of the best parts about solving that is if I copy down here, I can then say if I want to solve this for B, I can then just come over here and say I want to do minus 15 and then minus 15. So that thought process part is I really can show what's going on. So 23 minus 15 is 8. So I can just see from one step to the next more fluently. And that 15 minus 15, I can get a 0, but I can just say, well, I want to just continue showing there from, so those will turn into a 0 or a B, and I can insert that in there. So it goes directly into a PDF, and I can just drop that in. I click on that math, move the little crosshairs to where I want, and then I can drag and shrink the size however I want. And so that's a really cool way to just use PDFs and resources that you've already had.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Sorry, for those that are listening, this is Craig, who I'm going to be chatting a little bit about sharing some ideas. Do you mind if I ask a quick question here?
Sure.
So with this PDF reader, is that an additional subscription, or is that included in with EquatIO itself?
Thank you. Good point. So that one is actually, it's a premium feature from Read and Write. So that if you have premium Read and Write, then that will bring up this Texthelp PDF reader.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And then, so the one last thing I'm going to show you is our Microsoft Word update that we're doing. So here, if I pop open Microsoft Word, I have EquatIO for desktop here on my Mac, and you'll see the toolbar and the experience looks the same. It's just going to pop up on the bottom. And now I will have all the same tools. So if you would do this, you don't have the screenshot reader yet. But one of the things that I can do is that same part, I can do that math, and I could do x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. And so you might notice over here it says a screenshot reader, but there's also insert math, but there's also this other little button. And so the cool part is I can copy my math as I want. And if I choose to copy math ML and then go here in a Microsoft Word and literally just paste, what it does is it drops that into a Microsoft Word equation type. And so now I can go ahead and it will format that properly as however I want. It's actually the equation type for Microsoft Word. So that's a really cool way that it'll continue to do that. Another thing I could do if I want is I can copy the spoken text and I can just paste that in. So if I want to kind of go ahead and see what that would be read aloud, I can get those nicely. So that's great. This I can use the screenshot reader to take content from anywhere on my desktop, put it into Microsoft Word, because the screenshot reader will copy that and allow me to have those same options. And so that's great if you're populating other LMSs where EquatIO isn't in there yet, or populating into other places. That's a great way to get that content in there. All right. So now I'm excited to kind of toss it over to Craig. I'm going to drive for you, Craig, if that's okay. I'm really excited to hear about your EquatIO implementation that you have up there at Bedford.
Well, if anyone can't tell, you know, John is very enthusiastic about the product. And for those of you who are trying to take lots of good notes, I was too. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so my name is Craig Shiel, and I am the tech integrator at a high school in Bedford, New Hampshire. And I myself am a former math teacher. And 4 years ago, we started to go into this one-to-one environment. And how does that look in the humanities and the science and the math classrooms? And we did go the route of Chromebooks. And so we are a one-to-one Chromebook school. that is the device we have. And so my task back in the day was like trying to figure out, so how could we in fact use these devices in the math classroom? And I think a lot of people at that time thought, and some people at this, still to this day think that Chromebook is really meant for the humanities environment, and in reality, that's not necessarily the case. And so I came across John's GMath back in the day and connected with him, trying to figure out, so maybe this is the tool that will help allow our students to, as Texthelp says, make math digital. And so that's kind of like how we got involved and started to play around and test and see what EquatIO could do for us in the classroom setting at Bedford High School. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, John. So I'm going to start off just sharing maybe some back-end information in terms of if you are a school district that's just starting to dive into implementing EquatIO with your students or with teachers, just some things to ponder and consider. And then my two math teachers that, not mine, two math teachers that work with me are going to share some best practice of how they've actually utilized EquatIO with their students, as well as how they've utilized it, the tool themselves as a teacher. So to start, since we are a Google school, we use EquatIO's Chrome extension for everything that we do. And so last year, in going around classes and helping math teachers and students, we would have them go to the Chrome store, search EquatIO, go ahead and download it. And my recommendation would be to find that one individual that manages the Google console for your domain and ask them to actually automatically push that to students, so that that's already there ready to go, and it's just one less thing that you actually have to do with kids. I will say apologies if announcements go off, school just finished. And so that definitely will be a time saver if you ask your admin person who deals with the console to do that. That's one less thing you have to worry about. Students still have to, for the very first time when they click on it, actually acknowledge who they are and what Google account they're using. But other than that, it's more seamless, I think, in the long term. Plus, it's also there, so if kids see it, they may say, hey, what is this thing? Even on their own, and check it out. So that's one piece. If you go to the next slide, John. I think this is big, and I'm going to be honest, we've been using this tool for a while, and I would say about 75% of the stuff John showed today as new stuff was completely new to me, and I'm even more stoked about this tool. And so because of that, I do think that math teachers need to devote some time to play with these features when it's the very first time you're going to do it with students. If you just say, all right, everyone activate EquatIO, and then, yeah, you're really, it's not going to work. And just like with anything else, anything new, definitely some time to play. And so we would actually, when I go in, and I'll be going into a class soon, I believe next week, these students have to actually write mathematically using technology. They can't do anything by hand. And so we'll actually go through each of the phases and actually have them model it, practice it with potential problems that they're already solving in class and make it relevant. So not only is it a review activity for them to make sure that they're competent in the material they're learning, they're also getting practice at how to use the tool so that moving forward for the rest of the school year, they're good to go. You know, like, do you know you can take a picture of handwritten work and take it with your Chromebook? It doesn't have to be with your phone, and have it automatically show up with math text. So we will demo that. Those of you who have touchscreen Chromebooks, do you know that there's this great handy dandy handwriting feature where you can actually handwrite what you want, and away you go. So essentially, we're practicing each of those inputs and making sure students are all set. And then the next thing to consider just on the back end, if you go next slide, yeah, thank you, is definitely make sure students are going into that options, the settings, and looking at the different options as John had previously showcased. The default, let's see, what did I want to highlight here? Yeah, so predictions, all of those aren't necessarily turned on. And so, you know, if you want it to automatically predict math or chemistry or formulas, you'll want to make sure students actually go in and deal with that. And I also would agree with John's statement about the font size, you know, going bigger and then making the actual text smaller is definitely the way to go, so that you don't have to worry about dealing with the resolution issue there. So all of those things, I know it takes time. I know we all, as teachers, have a lot of curriculum to showcase and demonstrate and make sure students fully understand. But I do think if you spend a good 20 minutes the first time you're going to do this with kids and walk through some of these things, it's just going to set you up for a much richer and rewarding experience in the future. So next slide, John. All right, so what we're going to do, just perfect timing. Our two math teachers have miraculously showed up after the bell here. I'm gonna pretty much hand it off to them. I am gonna start off with one example, but I do have here with me Stefan Fritz and Lauren Hagedorn.
Hi.
And we're just gonna talk through some student examples, followed by how they're using it as teachers. Next slide, please. All right, so one big thing, we are an IB school, we're an international baccalaureate school, and so one definite, like, yes, this is out of the park tool for relevancy is students writing papers, and I had indicated that earlier. I truly wish I could show you an example of a student's work that's being submitted this year. This particular course is a 2-year course, and he produced it last year. No word of a lie, he had over 70 lines of text dealing with summations, integrals, your higher end mathematical writing. And with the help of the mobile feature of taking a picture of each of those, he was able to take hours off of his night by taking photos of those and inserting them as math text instead of an image. And he was pretty proud of himself that he was able to produce something really good and really professional looking. And so that was obviously more of an example of a student at a higher level, but definitely a great tool for being able to showcase your math through writing. And so if you go to the next slide.
Well, can I actually just add to that a little bit? I think that one of the things that's super relevant is just developing skills for presentable artifacts, be it in any discipline, right? But now that we have something like EquatIO, well, we can say, well, now in the math class, this is not a place where you can say, well, I can't type this up, so I'll just handwrite something. Like, we can now bring this into the 21st century with artifacts and presentations, all that stuff now that used to say, well, I can't do this. Now we can make clean documents, and students kind of like prepare themselves for making professional presentations of their thinking outside of school as well, using a tool like this. So I really like that, all that Craig just said.
All right, you're on.
Oh, here we go. So EquatIO Math Space. This is something that actually Lauren and I have done in the past, where we'll use the Math Space tool to kind of create like a warm-up problem, a lot like what you have probably done in the past on paper. But what's cool about the Math Space as a warm-up is I've kind of created like these little hints. That's these little red boxes on the screen. And since, you know, once students know how to interact with these things, they understand I can remove that rectangle, and then I can see the hidden message that's underneath. It's honestly kind of an efficiency piece for me, because sometimes things get chaotic in the first 5 minutes, and this is a way for me to move around and facilitate conversations or check in with students, and other students can be a little bit more independent by looking at these hints. And it's also just another way for students to practice demonstrating their knowledge in a clean and professional looking way. That student example on the right-hand side was like a really nice piece of work where a student kind of actually wrote up their understanding and their thinking, and they could send it back to me. I could annotate all over it, and I could even assign points if I wanted to do something like that. What I really like too is sometimes I'll see lots of great problems in books or online or things that other people have used, but I just want to tweak them a little bit for my class. And so I really like using MathSpace kind of as that place to create the content that I'll then share and have students interact with a little bit of a twist that kind of meets their needs. So it's just because of its fluidness and dynamicness, if that's a word.
We'll make it a word.
We'll make it a word.
Yes, yes.
I like using it for that. And I really like just another spin on a way to do a warm-up. Do you always need to do something on EquatIO or on MathSpace for a warm-up? No, but it's just nice to have variety. And so it's sometimes just a welcome thing to do it on a computer and not on a piece of paper. Yeah.
Next slide. Please and thank you. There we go. Excellent.
This next one is something that I've done in my class using the assignment feature in MathSpace. And so on the left is what I gave students. So I basically sent a copy to each student in my class and asked them to show all of their work step by step. And then on the right are 2 of the responses that I got. And so students spent some time in class. I think this actually was a warm-up as well. And they wrote out all of their work, and I was able to then, in the pink writing, give them feedback and just send it back to them without even having to say, oh, Joey, you got it wrong, or walking over to the student. And I was able to kind of do that. It does take a little time to get used to it and keeping up with all the answers coming in, but it was kind of cool to be able to give that feedback and using it beyond that, doing it after class, giving feedback would give me the time to do that. And then still kids can go back and see that. It just pops up in the corner of their screen and says you have a response, and then they can go and tweak things if they need to. And with this particular problem, I actually then had students videotape the problem and explain the steps that they did with it. And so it was cool that they could do that all right from their Chromebook. And so kind of like both Craig and Stefan said, it was nice that it's all very legible and you see all the steps and they know how to lay it out with the steps, and this tool is just really good for them to be able to do that.
And the other thing I'll add, while these 2 examples are with MathSpace, I know a lot of people in the math department at the high school also do warm-ups just with a Google slide presentation. Lauren, in fact, was doing something with hers today, and each slide is the warm-up problems for the day. So you can even use EquatIO just with the same Google slide presentation for a quarter, or the same slide for your unit, and each slide is that day's warm-up, and again, using EquatIO to pull in all the mathematics that you want students to be able to look at, to be able to solve probably by hand for that day. But that's another way by which you can use the tool outside of MathSpace dealing with warm-ups. Next slide, please.
Sure, and I'm just baffled by so many amazing things. That's an awesome thing to have a running warm-up slide. Thank you.
Oh, all right. You're
Nice.
welcome.
All
All
right.
right. Okay. Check. All right. So this is an example of something. Again, think about it. We've been using EquatIO now for 2 years, and so we actually got this idea from Oscar Perales, I believe. I'm sure I'm butchering his name, and I apologize, but I'll have
Sorry
the
if you're out there.
yeah, we'll have the 2 explain what they did here.
So the piece on the left is
Oh yeah, look at that.
yeah, that is a spreadsheet that students each had their own copy of through Google Classroom. And as they were trying to work through a series of steps to get to the next round, to get to the next round, to get to the next round. So if they type the correct code, it's coded. So if they type the right code in that column, then it pops up ready for the next step. And those different steps that we created will take you to different math spaces with different types of problems.
Yeah, so it's basically like a digital worksheet activity, but it's just so much more engaging when you have this goal of, can you guess the code? There's some mystery behind it. What's the link going to be? You're not just walking up to a table and grabbing the next worksheet, right? And what you can see, actually, can you go back to that math space real quick? This was an activity where they're typing in equations, but depending on where the exponents and constants and numbers actually fall in those shapes, that's what creates that code for the next round beneath it. So you can kind of see where all those shapes kind of map to the order of the digits, whatever the answers are to these things. So there's kind of like a self-check in there. There's some mystery. I'm a big fan of escape rooms, and that's the kind of idea. It's like your breakout EDU stuff. And it's something that's a little bit more, I'm going to say, dynamic again, because you can move things and play with things, and it's just a little bit more engaging than sitting with a pencil and paper on a worksheet.
And John, if you want to go to that previous, so if you go back to that spreadsheet and click on the link up above as well, you can show them what that one looks like, because each one was set up a little different, and that'll just give your viewers a better understanding.
It does take a lot of work to set it up. It's a little intensive to create all of these different like spaces and make them look nice and all of that, but it really is nice to be able to not have to go check students' answers and check in with them, and it's more about helping them with the concepts, because it is very self-checking, and there's a lot of, they can do a lot of manipulation and trying different things. So. And
it's pretty awesome when the next year you're like, what's that link? And you find it and you share it, and you're not making 100 copies of things. Or, I gotta say, I really so like great. That. Oh, let me grab that link. Sweet, there's my lesson, done.
So for the viewers who are really interested in how this works, I believe that the link to this is in the show notes of this particular slide. You'll be able to get your own copy, and you can see the back end when you click on appropriate cells in the spreadsheet, just how it all works. And essentially that's how we were able to, or not we, these two individuals who I'm sitting with were able to actually create what has been created here. So there's that piece. And then if you want to go to the next example, John, please. So now we're just going to switch, and we're going to just talk about how our teachers are really using it on their end in terms of creating content for students.
So the one on the left is from my class. I just made this. It's actually a quiz. I gave it a couple days ago. And you wouldn't even notice, but the equations in the middle there that are circled in purple were made with EquatIO. I use it all the time for all the equation work in docs and slides and all of those things. Like Craig said earlier today, I was making a warm-up and using EquatIO and just inserting it into my electronic slides.
Yeah, and same for me. That's my slide over there on the right, and I'll talk a little bit about what I do with my slides and EquatIO. But it's just seamless to try and put some math into a slideshow. This actual slide that you're looking at is kind of like part of my template for the flipped videos that I make. And so when I'm trying to create notes for students and I'm working through examples, I can just drop the expressions or equations I'm solving and demoing for them. It's just easy to use. It's like a great tool that makes that gap between an idea for a lesson into here's the actual product. It just narrows that gap quite a bit. So yeah, I use it in all things that I make. Probably the majority of time I'm using EquatIO, it's for content creation, and I can be really nitpicky about how things look. I'm all about designing things right and making them look good, and EquatIO lets me do that. So it's really satisfying when I create a piece of work that looks good. It makes math digital, yes, but beautiful as well. Wow, how about that?
Look at that.
Look at that.
All right.
All right, we can go to the
next slide.
I love it.
Next slide. All right. So
I think this is me too.
Yeah, this is you.
This is again, like, content creation is kind of all, or the majority of what I use EquatIO for. And so this is like when I'm coming up with my flipped lessons, I am sitting there with my textbook or whatever worksheet I'm building things off of, and I've got my phone open with the mobile EquatIO that's on the left, and I'm just inserting things into my slides where I'm kind of creating my my template for my flipped lessons. And so then then I go into the creating of the videos and screencasting and all that stuff. But this is a way for me to kind of rapid fire take content directly from the curriculum and put it into a slideshow. Again, just narrowing that gap between here's what I want and here's where I want it. And I find it super easy. Very rarely am I needing to tweak the math. It looks pretty. It's pretty spot on. I'm pretty impressed actually with getting all, as you even go on in the math difficulty and like into pre-calc, this is in, and even calculus. It's pretty good at recognizing stuff. So I use this all the time for making my flip lessons.
Next slide. Was that okay? So that was our examples there. So hopefully that kind of inspires those that are listening in, give you kind of an idea of just a quick snapshot of what can be done. As I had mentioned earlier, we started using and exploring with EquatIO last year, and this year our goal is to truly see how we could use this tool even more with our students. As indicated, our teachers are really utilizing this tool in terms of content creation, and so what are some of these other ways beyond this digital breakout example that we showed that we can also use the tool with our students.
That was so amazing. I am like, I wish I was a student in their classes. That would have been so amazing.
Do you know what, I tend to say that a lot actually to teachers, like and as Fritz says, it's a very exciting time right now to be a teacher, right? Mm-hmm. And if only a tool like this was available when I was teaching math 8 years ago, I think things would have helped kind of turn the light bulb on to some students that were struggling with math.
Yeah. So one of the things that you see up here is our stars and our ratings. So if you love EquatIO, go hop onto the Chrome store. Good ratings help us populate and have people make the choice to install EquatIO. So that's always it's great for our Free for Teachers program. So all teachers go sign up and go to texthelp.com/free-for-teachers, and you get all the premium features as well. So yeah, and I think Katie, we're going to jump over to you and do some questions for us.
Super, thank you. So just a quick reminder to everyone on the call that you can ask our amazing presenters today a question by typing into the question/chat box in the GoToWebinar panel. And I do have a few that came in during the presentation today. The first one is for Craig, Stefan, and Lauren. Could you tell us what you think is the biggest impact EquatIO has made with your students?
Good question.
Yeah, I think with my students, I think it's mostly an indirect impact, right? So they're not getting the handwritten math that I copy and then give out to them. Everything is clear, everything is legible. We'll do sometimes we'll use like Google Forms for quizzes where they're actually using their end of EquatIO to type in their responses or things like that. When I have them create artifacts, whether it's like, as Craig was mentioning before, for like an IB type of project, or just, hey, I want you to look into solving quadratics, and I want you to write up something about the different solving methods. I might say, I don't want your handwritten stuff. I want you to actually make this look nice, presentable, and so they get to use EquatIO just in the same way I would, right? I think at the heart of it, it's a great tool that allows you to make your math look nice and presentable and usable digitally, right? And so I use that all the time because I'm trying to constantly create things, and whenever I want my students to create things, I kind of hold them to that same standard. So
I would also add, like, I had mentioned we're a Google school, and a lot of our teachers are in, I would say 99% are in Google Classroom, and when a kid is absent, a lot of this stuff, right, indirectly, as Fritz said, this material is readily available to the students, whether they're in class or not, and they're not waiting to come in necessarily 2 days from now. We see our kids every other day. Do you have that packet, or do you have that worksheet? I wasn't here. I wasn't, like, not everything, but a lot of the stuff can be made digital and shared through Classroom. So indirectly, I think it, as Fritz said, I think it can have an impact with your students. And with Lauren's example, I'll also mention, like, just with anything else, it's great to mix things up. And so maybe you wouldn't use Math Space every day to do a warm-up, but that's the same way as you probably shouldn't do a warm-up every day with paper and pencil. Our teachers change it up with whiteboards work. Our teachers, and so I think EquatIO is just another tool in the toolbox for teachers to help change things up, right? And so I think that also helps with that.
Super, thank you. Another one I have, maybe this one's for you, John, is could you give an example of how to use EquatIO in some of the earlier elementary grades?
Yeah, definitely. I think the EquatIO Math Space is a great way to do that. One of the things that I didn't talk about with EquatIO Math Space, I don't want to waste time trying to find it, but I have some templates that I use that have, like, I have a 10 frames example. You can drop out, this is my own copy, but you can just drop out counting discs for them to use and just literally just copy paste those out. So give them the manipulatives to use or not. And so it gives the power to the students to be able to choose. You can even scaffold it up. So if you have your Google Classroom set up so you group students in different types of grouping, when you do the sharing part, you can share to different groups. So you can give quickly differentiated problems to people. So some get manipulatives, some might not need them. So I think that's one great thing. And then also from the Math Space, you can download that as a PNG, and then you can insert that anywhere in the G Suite by doing the insert image from the computer. So you can take an item and drop it in as a Google form or into a Google slide. So I think it's a great way to and then you can link that to the Math Space to make them hop back in there. So I like that aspect. And my daughter is 4 and she loves the EquatIO Math Space. She thinks I make a drawing app because she wants to help me work and come draw. So she likes to freehand draw on there and then do the shapes. She loves to bring in some of the different text helpers who are doing things and the hot air balloon in the cars. And so just these things, it just makes it easy to drop and create different items. And to represent that thought process. And then she likes to use the speech input because she can't type yet to explain what's going on in the process. So I think those are all great ways to do that for students who might not be able to type the speech input. And also the prediction is really good for things like 3 times 4. They can get those notational things, or like by 4. And so things that are those math notation parts that are tricky to do, I think it's a great way for them to represent their thought process.
Great, thanks. And a couple of our attendees picked up on the fact that at Bedford you guys have the touchscreen Chromebooks. I know it's kind of hard to demo here on the webinar, but would you mind describing the process of using the touchscreens with EquatIO in terms of this, the handwriting feature?
Yeah, so good question. We actually, while I had mentioned touchscreen, not all of our students have touchscreen Chromebooks. We probably only right now have about, I would say in the whole high school, maybe about 80 kids altogether. And so we have some students who have that ability to use that feature, and I do showcase it so that if there are kids in the room when I'm demoing this, or if the teacher's demoing it, they could say, hey, by the way, those of you who actually have a touch screen, by all means, this is what this does. You can also use the feature with your trackpad, right? You can move your finger around and actually write x squared plus 2x, and envision that on the track, but the same thing works. I know Fritz uses, when he does his screencasting of videos and such, he has a Wacom tablet, and so that by using a tablet, he can also use the handwriting feature because it just acts as a touchpad on a Mac computer, and he can utilize that feature as well as if he's physically handwriting. So it can be done. We're not a full school that have touch screens, but for those kids that have it, I think they have even a better advantage than those that don't.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And John, could you tell us if EquatIO works with any LMS systems?
Yeah, so EquatIO works, so obviously it works great with Google Classroom. We are integrating it further as well. The EquatIO Math Space works really great. We work with the Canvas LMS right now, and we're exploring some other LMS options. So if you're interested, if you have an LMS that you really want us to work with, that you think would be great, you can send feedback through the EquatIO link and just let that know. We can continue the conversation. We're always looking for further integrations and kind of have that ability now, as you've seen through the PDF reader and our Canvas integration. So. Yeah, I'm excited to see EquatIO in other spaces.
Great. I'm noticing we're just at the top of the hour here, so I'm afraid that's the last question we'll have time for today. But if we didn't get to one of your questions, we do have them recorded via the GoToWebinar console, so we can follow up with you after the session. And before we sign off, I'd like to congratulate the winner of our Shake Up Learning book giveaway. And today's winner is Lisa Kana. And I'll be in touch with you later today to send you your free book. Congratulations.
Woohoo!
Congratulations.
Love the sound effects. Awesome. So lastly, I just wanted to send a big thank you to Lauren, Craig, Stefan, and John for your presentation today. And a big thank you to everyone who was able to join us. Stay tuned tomorrow for a follow-up email, which will include the webinar resources, a survey, as well as some additional resources that we walked through today. So we hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks again.
Thanks, y'all.